Time now for our political roundtable. Today we have Sabbak, Assistant Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting and former Executive Director of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, and Stephen Lawson, a Republican communications strategist who served as a senior communications advisor to House Speaker John Burns. He also worked for Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Congressman Mike Collins. Welcome to panel. We just heard a very interesting conversation with Zach, so I'll let you take away the first question.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to start. Tort reform was Governor Kemp's top legislative priority this session. Are we seeing some of the fallout now from some of the decisions, some of the votes that some state lawmakers cast? Stephen, I want to start with you.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you're certainly seeing that. It was a tough vote for a lot of people, but it's important to back up when we talk about tort reform for your viewers, what this bill actually did. A lot of this was just common sense proposals, things in here, like if you were suing someone in an auto accident, being able to know that whether or not you were wearing a seatbelt. If you own a business and someone comes onto your property and shoots someone else, you shouldn't be liable necessarily for that. So there were a lot of very common sense things in this bill. But look, at the end of the day, people had to vote their conscience. Obviously, I understand both sides of Representative Vance's argument. On the one hand, certainly I think it probably could have been handled a little better on a personnel level. It probably should have waited until after session. But at the same time, he had to know his employer was very interested and invested in this bill. It's what their members wanted. It's what his constituents wanted. And so at the end of the day, I think he walked into that vote potentially knowing what was going to happen.
Look, I mean, I think we saw a lot of the business community reaching out, trying to get relief from the governor and from the state leadership. What we saw in the House mostly was the other side coming in to say, look, this bill is going to affect people's ability to sue if they had been raped, if they had been victims of sexual trafficking, of human trafficking. And that kind of was really the tone of the opposition at that point. So I think that, we saw the vote was incredibly close. I can't remember last time a vote was that close.
A one vote margin.
It was a one vote margin. Yeah. You had 3 Democrats jump and vote for it. I do think that you will continue to see fallout as the session kind of goes on and then even into election season.
I want to ask you all about a vibe check because we love a vibe check on the Georgia vote. But first, I want to ask you about some more bipartisan action. Tort reform did become bipartisan, as you said. House Bill 428, an effort to codify IVF protections. It passed the Senate and the House. Val, do you think that this move could be a runway for other protections? We know since the heartbeat bill passed, there's been a gray area for some doctors when they're dealing with abortion care.
I think to an extent, sure. I think that you'll see bills like this to codify, to protect IVF. I think that there was a bill that was dropped to help protect contraception, especially when we're dealing in a world post Roe v. Wade. I think that you will see certain things. But then on the other hand, you saw a hearing this week that would ban abortion totally. And so you kind of do get the both sides.
And I was going to ask Stephen about that. That's a good segue. There was a bill partisan by House Republicans to put a complete ban in Georgia. Is that going anywhere?
No, it's not. It was a hearing only. I think that's an important distinction there. But yeah, I think obviously IVF protections were really important. Obviously, that was a priority of House Speaker John Burns, received bipartisan support, passed out of the Senate. And as Val said, there was another bill dropped to protect contraception for women. I think those are great moves by Republicans, especially in a post-Roe world. And I think on top of being really good policy, they're also really smart politically.
Mm-hmm. We are coming up with about 60 seconds left in this segment. I think a good use of our time would be, we have 1 week left coming up in this legislative session. Number one thing you're watching for to happen over the next week, Stephen?
I think the budget negotiations are going to be very tense over the next week. Obviously, between the House and the Senate and the appropriations chairman there, they're very far apart right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that gets brought in for a landing.
Mm-hmm. Val?
You have a few issues that are still kind of pending. You have a bunch of social legislation that's still out there, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, some of the anti-trans legislation is still out there. I heard another rumor about sports betting. I know I talked about that last time, so we'll see if that actually ends up going anywhere or not. And then there was a voting bill that was moving through this week. So I think that we are seeing some of those last minute measures trying to see if they still have life.
A lot to keep track of. Good news. The panel will be right back and we will talk about it all.
We're back with our panel here. Guys, let's do a little bit of tariff talk. There's been a lot of tariff talk coming from the Trump administration. We saw a 20% tariff on China, 25% on Mexico and Canada, a lot of different tariffs, some being pulled back, some not taking effect. But I want to talk about an auto tariff that was announced this week. 25% tariff on all foreign-made vehicles and car parts is expected to take effect in a couple days here. How could this impact Georgia's economy? As we know, we are trying to get into that business. We are in that business.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of auto manufacturers on edge a little bit. Obviously, we've got a significant car manufacturing presence here in Georgia between Kia and Hyundai. But again, I think this is probably part of a larger negotiation, art of the deal tactic from the Trump administration. It's going to be really interesting to watch how serious those get and how long they go, right? Because I think there's going to be a lot of lag time on prices going up on those cars.
Val?
And I mean, to the counter of that, I think that people are still hurting. People are still, living paycheck to paycheck. I think seeing those tariffs and depending on when the costs go up and how long it lasts, because they're trying to balance it back out eventually. But when is eventually?
When is eventually? That's
Correct.
a big question that a lot of people are saying. Well, with that, thank you both so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having
We'll have
us.
more on the after hours version of Georgia Vote.